Hey guys, how are you? I just wanted to come back and talk a little bit about the implications of Christianity and critical theory. And if you missed my video that was earlier this week, you can just hop on there and catch those few minutes, which explains the main tenets of critical theory, which just talks about how the world is divided. The theory itself is based on power dynamics and division. And perhaps you started to notice how our society is divided into the oppressed and the oppressor groups. And there's some important information in there, but today we're going to do part two. So if you missed part one, go back and jump on that. But part two, I want to talk about the strengths of critical theory and then just some of the ways that it operates as a separate worldview from Christianity, and some of the ways that if you are endeavoring to live the way of Jesus, it's going to come in conflict with us and begin to erode our faith if we try to follow critical theory as well as the gospel. And so here are some of the strengths. I'm drawing super heavily, like basically all my material has come from an apologist named Neil Shenvi. And if anybody's interested in reading his articles, they're super good. But I just wanted to basically get his data and research in front of you to help us learn and grow together. So here, this is his categories and his material, but I wanted to put it before you. This is what he says are the strengths. Critical theory, the first strength is that it highlights how evil oppression is. And you have probably read scriptures in the Bible that tell us that in the way of Jesus, we ought to stand up for the powerless and we ought to give our voice to those who have no voice. Justice is so important to the heart of God, and but it's justice in the way of Jesus. And we have to even watch how justice and how oppression are defined in scripture and the way that they're defined in society. But one strength of critical theory is that it highlights the evil of oppression. The second strength that it has is that it shows, because it operates in groups and in not individuals, it shows how laws and institutions can promote sin. And yes, it is humans who are sinful, but as humans create broken systems, sin begins to take on a much larger scope and scale. And we can look to slavery in the United States. We can look to the Holocaust. We can look to apartheid, and we can see how evil and oppression become institutionalized within a country to promote sin. And so critical theory does a really good job of highlighting this. And the third strength that it has is that it talks about the power dynamics of a dominant group forcing its ideals upon society or upon a group that isn't as powerful. And I think that one example that Neil Shenvi gives that I think we all can relate to is Hollywood's influence of what it means to be beautiful, or what sexuality should look like. And our young children are growing up under a lot of pressure to look a certain way, to act a certain way. And that's an example of hegemonic power at work. And so it shows how it is real and it can shape our norms and values either for good or for bad. So those are kind of some of the strengths of critical theory. But I do want to talk to you as well about some of the ways that critical theory is its own worldview, and that if we follow it all the way through to the end, it is going to conflict with the way of Jesus. And the first thing is that it's a worldview that takes a very different approach. It's telling a different narrative. It's answering some of those huge worldview questions, such as, what does it mean to be human? What is our purpose? Why are we here? What is this place that we live? And, will it go on forever? Is there such a thing as eternity? Who tells me what is right from wrong? All of these huge questions, these meta-narrative questions, Christianity answers very differently from critical theory. And so it functions as a separate worldview and a conflicting worldview to the way of Jesus by answering these questions very differently. Number two, the the thing that one of the reasons for this is because of the way that it views truth. And when somebody brings forward a fact or a statement or a belief in critical theory, you don't primarily ask, is this true? You look for the motives of the person underneath the question and say, is this person trying to have power over me? And so you're always looking at the power dynamics and the motives of the person. And for instance, if someone were to say, well, I believe that the Bible says abortion is wrong, or I believe abortion is morally a wrong decision, someone may look at this and say, well, it's my body and it's my right. You're just saying this because you want to have the power to control my body and my choices. The primary question isn't, is this claim true? It's, what are the power dynamics underneath so that you can stay in power over me? And so even in its search for truth, it approaches things in a very different way, which actually completely undermines being able to bring the Bible into a conversation about formation, because people look and say, you're trying to power play me. They're not looking and saying, is what the Bible actually says true? Here's the third thing, and it's that we talked about this a little bit on Sunday and a little bit in part one, is that it creates an adversarial identity. And that means that rather than humanity having any opportunity to be unified, again, back to the first civil rights movement in the United States and Martin Luther King Jr.'s call to common humanity, that humanity should rise above its factions and be united together because this is who we were made to be in the image of God. Critical theory divides everyone into oppressed or oppressor groups, and this means that you are always in a position of having an adversary, and it's always leading to division. There is no opportunity to be unified because you need an oppressor and you need an oppressed group in order for the theory to function. Here's the fourth thing, and this was actually one that I think is so important for us to grasp, and it is the issue of hegemonic power. And it's this idea that the dominant group is trying to impose its values, its norms, its truths upon the oppressed group. This is a major conflicting point because where critical theory will say, you don't have any right to tell me anything that's true, I am liberated and I can choose whatever I want. We need to go in eyes wide open if we are endeavoring to live the way of Jesus, that the entire Bible is telling us that there is one true way to live. And so this is like a major conflicting point. And so many Christians are beginning to listen to culture and say, well, maybe I can live however I want and still follow Jesus. But the whole point of following is that we are submitting our lives to being shaped by Jesus. As Galatians 2:20 says, our lives are not our own. We have been bought with a price. And so just to go in eyes wide open, yes, the Bible is trying to shape us to be like Jesus. This is God's goal, is to grow us up into maturity, to being like Jesus, to being with him, being like him, doing what he did, letting his spirit work in us and through us in the world. And so this whole idea of not letting anything else have power over you, as Christians, we're going the opposite way. We're saying, God, I give you power over me. I give you the power to shape and form my life. And so that's a major conflicting point. Here's the fifth thing, and this is the last thing I want to highlight about the conflict between Christianity and critical theory, is that many times, while Neil Shenby calls it moral asymmetry, and he says many times people act immorally or speak immorally towards an oppressor group, that if it was towards any other group, that kind of language, that kind of hatred, that kind of behavior would never be allowed. And so it's saying, well, because they're oppressing me, I can say or do whatever I want. And he gives the example of someone disapproving, someone at a Trump rally, picking up a brick and throwing it at a Trump supporter's head, for no other reason that they were a Trump supporter and that wasn't appreciated. And the person who perpetrated this was actually like a local ethics professor. But that we have these blind spots that when I perceive you as an oppressor and I am an oppressed person, then it doesn't matter how I act towards you. I can act immorally towards you, but because you're in the oppressor category, it's not immoral of me. And again, in the way of Jesus, our actions always matter. And Jesus is always inviting us not only to love our brother and sister or to love our neighbor, but also to love our enemies. And so Jesus never lets us off the hook and says, well, okay, now it's okay for you to retaliate. He says, it's not my way. And so it's very important for us to keep learning and keep holding the gospel up as our lens and saying, how do I learn to see through the gospel? How do I learn to think through the gospel? Let me read you this from Neil Shenvi before I close out this part today. Christianity tells one comprehensive, overarching narrative about reality in 4 basic acts: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. Who are we? We are the creatures of a holy, good, and loving Creator God. What is our fundamental problem as human beings? We have rebelled against God. What is the solution to our problem? God sent Jesus to bear the penalty of our rebellion and to rescue us and bring us new life. Our primary moral duty is to love God and devote our lives to Him so that we can glorify Him. This is the basic story of Christianity. And it's again coming back to that again and again, where critical theory would want to push us into the place where life is all about oppression and that there is no good God, there is no good creator, and that you are liberated to be whoever you want to be, wherever you want to find your identity. Your identity is found in your group orientation. This is what critical theory teaches. It's found in your gender or your race or your sexuality or your class. But Jesus says, no, I'm going to free you from all of that, and you can find new life. You can find an identity in me. And so I hope this was helpful in some way, and that we can learn together to strengthen our faith through loving God with all our minds.